Welcome to Wines We Drink, a podcast for wine lovers and learners. I'm Charlotte Norsworthy Varnum, and together with my counterpart Keith Herndon, we'll be exploring a new wine each week. Keith is a lover of wine, and I'm a learner of wine, and we hope you'll sip along with us. Welcome, everyone. You have found our summer fun project, the Wines We Drink podcast. I'm Charlotte Varnum, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Keith Herndon, a certified wine sommelier.
Charlotte, thank you. Yes, this is indeed our summer fun project, and we're recording today in my happy place, my basement wine kitchen, surrounded by bottles of my favorite wines. And today, the wonderful aromas of something you've cooked up for our pairing segment later in the show.
Yes, it is always great to be here in your wine kitchen. We always have so much fun here drinking and talking about wines, and many times even when we're not recording a podcast episode. But today, you're right, we're delighted to be here for the 7th episode of our milestone 5th season, and thank you for teasing that dish that we'll be enjoying a little bit later.
Listeners, if you're new to the show, we've introduced my co-host's alter ego this season, Chef Charlotte. And oh my, what a treat that's been. So far, we've had pairings with lobster, shrimp risotto, and last week's incredibly delicious fried chicken and champagne pairing.
That was fun.
Yeah, if you've missed any of our previous episodes from this season or earlier seasons, you can find them on most of the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We also have a complete guide to our seasons and episodes at wineswedrink.com.
I'll also throw out that we have photos of all of these food and wine pairings on our Instagram at The Wines We Drink if you're interested in some inspo. In last week's episode, we celebrated the midpoint of the season with an incredible true champagne, okay? And so in keeping with our show's traditions, following the midpoint is when we begin to feature our selection of red wines.
Yeah, through our 6 episodes so far, we've enjoyed some truly, I'm just going to call them great wines. Mm-hmm. It included a South African Sauvignon Blanc, and from California, a sparkling rosé, a Vermentino, and an iconic Napa Chardonnay. But hey, it's time for some reds, right? And we're starting our red selections with a beauty.
Yes, I am so ready for some reds. Let's give our listeners the backstory on how you selected today's featured wine.
Of course, we're using our book, Wine Conversations, Exploring Meaning, Mystery, and Myth. It was published earlier this year, and we're using the book as the foundation for this season's shows. So today's wine is a little different. It was not mentioned directly in the book, but it was certainly part of the book's creation.
Okay, do tell.
So I had to go to Minneapolis for a conference, and I was really excited about checking out the city's wine world, largely because of a wine enthusiast article that I had read the year before. Mm-hmm. Okay, the magazine touted Minneapolis as, quote, one of the best wine scenes in America, end quote.
Wow.
Well, that was unexpected. Yeah. But I lined up interviews for the book with 2 of the city's prominent sommeliers, Leslie Miller and Peter Plain. They were wonderful with their time and their interviews, which made it into the final compilation, and they provide some wonderful insights. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about them more later in the episode.
So how did that lead to today's wine pick?
Oh, yeah. How to get back to that, right? Well, if I'm dining in a new city and I have access to 2 of its wine experts, I'm asking for some recommendations, yes. Right? And that led me to Fima's, an excellent restaurant that describes its food as a modern take on French Moroccan cuisine. So the wine we're drinking today is one that I first had while dining at Fima's.
Okay, well, cool. Can you tell our listeners about the bottle that we're opening?
Yeah, so we're opening a 2022 vintage of Syrah that actually comes from Morocco.
Cool.
Okay, the French winemaker Alain Griot, who was best known for his Northern Rhone wines, accidentally discovered some amazing organic vineyards while cycling in Zanata. So he struck up a partnership with the Thalvin winery there in 2005 and began making this wine. It's sold under the label Sirocco. Now, Alain himself passed away in 2022, but the label continues with his sons Maxime and Antoine at the helm. Okay. I must point out here that the Northern Rhone region of France is the ancestral home of the Syrah grape. So it was fitting that a master winemaker from that region brought this wine from Morocco to a wider audience.
Yeah, I love that. A Moroccan grape with French ancestry is rediscovered by a French winemaker. You had it at a Moroccan-French fusion restaurant. I mean, that's a story that's almost too good to be true.
But for those of us who love a great glass of Syrah, we're so glad it's a true story. Guyot knew that he had found a jewel. The vineyard, which is located between Casablanca and Rabat on the Atlantic coast, now features 25-plus-year-old vines that thrive in sandy shale and gravelly soils, all while fending off the cold Atlantic Ocean winds. You know, I would love to visit there. It's a bucket list item for sure.
No, absolutely. We are building out a Wines We Drink travel bucket list this
absolutely.
season. So until you can travel there, you can still enjoy a glass of this wine, and we can transport our senses there.
Yeah, of course. The winemakers take great care with this wine. The grapes were 100% destemmed and fermented in closed concrete vats. The wine macerated with skins for about 10 days, which contributed to its deep color you'll see in a moment. The wine was aged for 15 months, with half that time in tanks, and then it finished in large French oak casks, 50% new, and they were imported from Burgundy, right? That French connection just keeps on coming.
It's absolutely in the blood of this wine, if you will. So let's go ahead and drink some wine. I see over there that you've got it in the decanter.
Yeah, I'm bringing it over here now, and, I'm going to... before I pour this, let me just say that, I have it in the decanter because I think for a Syrah like this, it benefits for about 45 minutes in the decanter. It lets it breathe and unwind a bit.
So we're getting that pour in there. And as you pour, I want to reference what you mentioned earlier, which is the color of this wine. I see what you mean. It is a dark, dark wine. Very deep purple.
Yes, it's definitely the color you'd expect from our Syrah made in this style.
It's really beautiful. I mean, it looks really luscious. I would say it's time to go in for that first sniff. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Those aromas come up pretty soon. So what first comes to your mind when you're...
I mean, it's very intense. This is our first red of the season. Very intense fruit aromas lifting up from the glass. You really don't have to put your nose in too deep to get dark fruit. Black cherry, blackberry, it's right up front.
Yeah, I love these classic dark fruits in a Syrah. This one doesn't disappoint at all, with the aromas. It carries on with some savory notes. There's a hint of black olive.
Yeah.
Kind of a briny aroma. That there's some woody notes there.
Yeah.
And, giving it a good sniff there again. Let's just take some sips of this and talk about the flavor profiles. Obviously we've had this before, right? But, every time you open a new a new bottle for the first time, it's like a rediscovery process.
It is. Your taste buds change. The context in which you're sipping on this wine changes. So you're right. I mean, it is like a new discovery. In preparing for today's episode, I knew this wine was going to express those dark fruits, right? There's also some plum in here, raisin notes that I feel like kind of give it a chewy texture. Like a great Syrah, you get wonderful notes of black pepper, too.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those wines where I really enjoy reading the tasting notes from its many reviewers. They highlight some of the flavor characteristics that come from its oak aging, like sandalwood and cinnamon and dark chocolate, right?
Yeah, I mean, those notes just keep unwinding with every sip, with any Syrah, but especially with this one. It's a complex Syrah in our glass today.
Yeah, this wine was crafted as a fruit-forward red, but it also finishes long and satisfying, right? There's enough juicy acidity to balance its tannins, and there's no bitterness at the end.
That's
I
right.
mean, it's an elegant wine.
That's right, yeah. The grapes as well may be from Morocco, but it's an old world style of Syrah that is really reflecting its French heritage.
Yes, I think that's a big part of the wine story, and I wish nothing but success for Elaine's son as they continue this legacy. I would say, so far, so good.
I would agree with that. I mean, this is an excellent wine with an excellent story and pedigree. So how much will our listeners need to pay to enjoy a bottle?
Well, last week, we really splurged with our fancy $100 champagne, but we're back down in the more affordable range with this week's wine, okay? According to the Vivino app, the average price for the 2022 vintage is $23.
Wow.
that represents a fantastic price point.
Yes.
Most French Syrahs of this quality would start at $50 a bottle, and many would be much higher price. And by quality, consider that our wine today has 3.9 out of 5 stars on the Vivino app, which across its recent vintages has placed it among the top 4% of all wines in the world.
Wow. This is one of those wines that I'll buy for the story and its quality, but now I'm also feeling good about it because I haven't busted the budget.
Yeah, and you'll feel good about pairing it with that wonderful dish that you've created. This whole time we've been talking and drinking, I've been taking in these wonderful aromas.
Yes.
I think it's time for you to shift into Chef Charlotte mode.
Okay, I will, but I'm tossing it back at you so that you could tell our listeners where the idea for this dish came from.
Well, we're back in Minneapolis at FEMA's restaurant that I mentioned earlier, right?
Yep.
I'm digging through its fabulous menu and talking over the options with our waiter. And then I saw this dish was served at the table across from me. When the waiter lifted the lid from the pot, the aromas filled the room. I mean, I was sold, right? And that is the same aroma that I'm getting from your dish. It's chicken tagine, a perfect pairing for our French-style Moroccan Syrah.
When you first told me about your FEMA's experience, I went looking for chicken tagine recipes and landed on one that seems the closest to your description. So I made it for me and my husband and my brother, and it was a hit. So I knew we had our pairing for this episode.
So first, tell us about chicken tagine. I mean, what is it? And a bit about your recipe.
Yeah, so tagine, whether it's made with chicken or some other meat like lamb, is a traditional Moroccan dish full of aromatic spices, some vegetables, some dried fruits. It's slow cooked. And in Morocco, they would use a clay or earthenware pot, which is called a tagine. And so that's where the name comes from. The meat is seared and then braised. You can serve it over rice or potatoes, more veggies, or you can have it as is with some fresh lemon and parsley on top as a finisher.
Well, we've already established that this pairing worked at FEMA's, so let's see how Chef Charlotte's version worked here in the wine kitchen.
Yes, by all means. So please put some of this chicken tagine I've put out in front of you here in your bowl and
right.
See what you think.
Okay, well, it certainly looks like the FEMA's version.
Oh, well, that's generous. That is generous, I will say.
Okay, so let me have a bite here. All right. Oh, my goodness.
As you're tasting, I'll just add a couple more notes about this specific recipe. What sets this recipe apart, I'll say, is that it uses dried apricots, uses chickpeas and lemons as part of the braising liquid. That, I feel, along with the spices that I've allowed to bloom right there at the beginning of cooking, makes for an incredibly fragrant dish with a touch of that sweetness that comes from the lemon and the dried fruit.
Wow. Chef Charlotte, you have nailed it here, right? The chefs at FEMA have nothing on you, right? Right?
Thank you.
The complex medley of the spices, they come together so nicely. I mean, that's really the way, I mean, it's a signature texture of this dish, right? And then the blending of those spices. And then the texture of the chicken is so tender, and it has absorbed the stew's flavors in such a nice way. And then when you take a sip of the Syrah here with this, right? Oh my, that's a flavor pairing that simply works. I mean, the black fruit, the spice, the pepper, the savory notes, they're all there, and then they get amplified by this wonderful dish.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I completely agree. This is so lovely to have this pairing right here. This dish is pretty complex, right? It's got a lot going on in terms of its flavors, and it really needs a wine that has the acidity, the firm tannins to cut through this stew's richness. You know, you get some of that metallic as well that really just ties it all together. It provides a nice balance to those flavors.
Wow. Well, once again, I still have my mouth full. Sorry. Once again, your culinary skills are so inspiring. I mean, it's great that we now have Chef Charlotte as part of the Wines We Drink podcast. So, Chef, if our listeners aren't ready for the challenge of making chicken tagine, Is there a simple cheese pairing that you might recommend?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I would go with a provolone cheese. It's not too soft. It's got a slight salty flavor, creamy texture. It really complements the Syrah's fruit and spice notes, I would say. It's a good option.
That sounds like an excellent suggestion. Right.
Well, and I will encourage anyone who's listening that, similar to making wine accessible on the show with our introduction of chicken tagine and all of our other fabulous dishes so far this season, I challenge you as well to try out one of these dishes. You might surprise yourself. This was pretty doable, I would say. But let's go ahead and take our short break. Keith and I are going to enjoy some more Sirocco, some more of this chicken tagine. We'll be back in a moment for a segment of the show that we call The Finish. Hello again, everyone. We are back from our break, and we are now in the portion of the show that we call The Finish. Today, Keith is going to revisit his trip to Minneapolis and explore why wine enthusiasts raved about its wine scene.
Charlotte, yes, I was initially surprised to read such a glowing review about that city and its wine scene. I mentioned earlier that I found this article in the Wine Enthusiast magazine. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to dig too deep to understand how it has emerged as a foodie town, and then the wine scene has kept pace with that. You know, anyone traveling there, in addition to FEMA's, should check out Boucheron, which is a finalist in this year's James Beard Awards.
Oh, wow.
Also, Bar Brava, which was Beard nominated for its outstanding wine and beverage program. I mean, there are so many wonderful places. I mean, the Wine Enthusiast article, again, mentioned Troubadour Wine Bar, and it's a really cool place to visit.
So in our book, Wine Conversations, Exploring Meaning, Mystery, and Myth, you included two experts from the city that we featured today, Minneapolis. Can you tell us more about them?
Yes. You know, I mentioned earlier when we started the book, when we started the podcast episode today, that we featured Leslie Miller and Peter Plain. So let's start with Leslie here. She's a force of nature, okay? Mm-hmm. A dual certified sommelier with a consulting firm, Amusé, and a boutique wine shop and online business called Sip Better. So let's listen to a brief clip from my interview with her about the Minneapolis wine market.
People used to call it a bee market, for food and wine.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. I mean, if you're looking around the country, I don't really know if there's a grade to put on Minneapolis for food and wine, but I'd say it's in the A category.
Your other Minneapolis expert represents one of the region's beverage industry icons.
You're right about that. I interviewed Peter Plain, a sommelier who is the wine department manager and wine buyer at Syrah, which is a shop with more than 90 years of history in the city. Wow. Here's a brief clip from Peter explaining why he thinks Minneapolis has emerged as a leading wine market.
I think there's diversity, and we've had quite a few really proactive importers in town. Distributors that also import wine, and a lot of them distribute those wines in other states. But having a set of distributors that really have gone out of their way to bring in some things that are not easily found other places in the United States.
Those two interviews contributed so much to the overall book project, I would say. And for me as the editor, they certainly provided some new perspectives on what cities that we typically think of as the wine scene.
Yes, and for our listeners interested in reading the entire interviews, you can purchase Wine Conversations on Amazon or through our local distributor Neighborhood Books. The purchase links are at our website, wineswedrink.com.
This is certainly an example of expect the unexpected. When it comes to these conversations. So in last week's episode, we talked about reducing pretentiousness around wine and the need to make it more approachable. And people like Leslie and Peter, I would say, are certainly doing their part.
Yes, they are. And that's the finish for today's episode.
We will be back next week with another, in our case, of summer episodes. Keith, can you tell our listeners what they can expect?
We are revisiting today's varietal, but with its down-under Australian personality on full display. Cheers, everyone.
Yes, until next week. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Wines We Drink. Listen to our other episodes anywhere you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Wines We Drink, and check out our episode guides at wineswedrink.com. Cheers.